You're listening to In Kap We Trust for the Always Next Year Podcast Studio Network. You can find the team on our Twitter at ANYPodcast or on our website, www.alwaysnextyearpodcast.com. And now, to bring us in, the Jackdaws.
A fighting man I used to be, revered and feared through Killarney. Now I'm back to hitching with the wind. But if Mickey Flynn should ever find me, I'll throw me caution all behind me and square off on that son of a bitch again. He cracked open a river too, he beat me Sunday through and through, and such over my unconscious frame. I won me healthy sheriff fights, well lucky son still had me life since Mickey Flynn beat me dumb and lame.
Hello and welcome to another episode of In Kap We Trust here at the Always Next Year Podcast. If you were listening to our new music that has been brought in, that is by the Jackdaws. That is my brother's band. It's an Irish folk rock band. Do us a favor, subscribe to them on, what are they on? Instagram. I'm terrible with the social medias. They are just called the Jackdaws. So we hope that you enjoy that. You're speaking to two Irish members of the group right now, and me and Rob. So Rob, how are you tonight, sir?
I am doing just fine. Could have been doing better, obviously, if the Sixers won, but not the case. But the Phillies won today, so 5-0 shutout, so I'm doing all right.
The Phillies did win, and they won at the hands of another masterful performance by our guy, Jared Eichhoff. More on him in a little bit, but we'll take it back and we'll start things on a not so positive, and we'll bring it right up to the positive here. So Vinny Velasquez is Vinny Velasquez again. So his early season stopper role for us is already looking like it's gone away. What is your evaluation of the last few Vince Velasquez starts? He's struggled in both of his outings now.
Very concerning. I was actually at the Detroit game where he lasted, I think he went 3 2/3, and he threw 99 pitches to get there. First two in, I don't think he made it out of the third inning. It might have been 2 2/3. I can't remember.
I think it was 2
exactly.
2/3.
Yeah, it was pretty bad. The first two innings he got out of without any runs against, but he didn't look good doing it. He threw a lot of pitches getting through those two innings, and then the third inning it just all fell apart. He gave up. Well, first off, he gave up the tying run, and they gave up a 2-run homer to Nico Goodrum, I think it was. And they took him out of the game with 2 outs in the third inning. He's already at 99 pitches, that's almost 35 pitches per. That's like 33 pitches per inning right there. That's pretty bad. And he went out. He did just about the same thing the other night in St. Louis. So it's really concerning to see him kind of reverting to his back to his old ways. Even Real Muto said something about it, that he's too in love with his fastball, that he needs to be more willing to throw his other pitches. So hopefully, stubborn as he's been, he'll listen to the veteran catcher who's done such a great job calling games throughout the season. He'll listen to Real Muto, he'll start working on his other pitches, and he'll get back to the way that he was pitching earlier on in the season.
That was the thing that stood out to me. So going into this season, I was more excited for Real Muto, the defensive aspect of him than the offensive. The offensive things, that's always the eye-popping, the eye-popping stats, and the thing that's the sexy sell. When you have a catcher back there who can be conceived as or perceived as one of the top 2 or 3, if not the best offensive catcher in the game, you get excited. And often you overlook the defensive prowess that comes with it. And he calls a great game. His framing this year has been better than any year in his career from Miami. There were 2 pitchers that I was most looking forward to him getting his hands on. I always felt like Eflin was kind of a polished enough pitcher that he didn't feel like a young guy to me. He just felt like he's a middle of the road kind of starter. Aaron Nola and Jake Arrieta, they are what they are. We knew that. But the 2 that I was most excited about was Nick Pivetta, who gets sent down, and Vince Velasquez. So they're 2 integral pieces to this young rotation, and we were banking on at least one, if not both of them, to really solidify a role here. Well, Nick Pivetta gets sent down, and Vince Velasquez, it's your opportunity to sit there and try to solidify yourself as a mainstay here in this rotation. Now, he started the year really nice, and he had some things to continue to build on, and it seems like it's all come crashing down, and you mentioned it, reverting back to his old ways. He's relying on, heavily on his fastball, and the thing that most concerns me is the fact that he was consistently shaking off one of the best catchers in baseball, in JT Realmuto. That's not a good recipe for success for a young pitcher who doesn't really know that his stuff just isn't that good. That's super concerning. So I don't know if you remember. It was I don't even remember the pitcher now. All right. Not that it matters. This guy started a handful of games. He started his first career game actually against St. Louis, and he said the one thing that he would never do is shake off Chooch. Very first inning, first opportunity for a strikeout, he shakes off Chooch. He gets lit up. And that's the same thing that I'm watching now with Vince. I'm sitting here watching him regularly shake off that off-speed spot pitch, purpose pitch, to go and try to pound another fastball in a corner. It's not that good. Everyone throws 95 now. He's not that special. A guy like Vince right now, you see it. We've heard it now for the last several years, but we've seen it a lot over the last year. The move to the bullpen. Do you have concerns with his ability to be an effective bullpen piece in the back end, or do you think that his stubbornness and unwillingness he may just be damaged and just not fit or long for Philadelphia?
You know what? I'm somewhere in between there. Bullpen guys nowadays, generally, you're looking for someone who can throw gas, who can throw 95 miles an hour, and only do it for, say, an inning. And that's exactly what Velasquez does. He has that mid to upper 90s fastball that he can blow by people. But he needs to, as you said, focus on developing a breaking pitch, a pitch that he can get batters out on. And as a reliever, you don't need that as much as you do as a starter, but you still need it. So I'm kind of, I guess, a little bit skeptical about his ability as a reliever. I think that maybe, if you only need an inning or maybe two batters out of him, then he might be okay, or at least better than some of the options that we currently have in the bullpen right now. But once again, I would be a little bit skeptical about his abilities as a reliever.
I'm intrigued by the thought of Vince Velasquez in the bullpen, but I am not intrigued or willing to say that he should be in Philadelphia's bullpen. I take a look and I see at the guys who are currently not active due to being hurt. I would rather Tommy Hunter all day, every day in a bullpen role because he is a proven bullpen arm. And last year had a great second half. Well, not great. He had a significantly better second half than he had first half for the Phillies. He's hurt. He's working his way back. David Robertson, same thing. He's a solid bullpen arm that you know what you're getting. I don't trust Vince. And at this point, it doesn't seem like JT Realmuto can trust Vince Velasquez. So that means the Philadelphia Phillies cannot trust Vince Velasquez. You're putting these guys in these high leverage situations, these integral parts of the game, and he would then have to change and adapt his mindset and regimen to that of a reliever. He doesn't seem like he has the mental wherewithal to be able to do that, at least not here, not yet. He would be an interesting piece for me to potentially sell on intrigue. Go ahead, acquire the best case scenario is Nick Pivetta begins to turn a corner in AAA, and very much so like Brett Myers did in 2008, he's able to come back up and pitch with success and work himself into a solid role in this rotation. And then you can move on from Vince, and that experiment is done. That's the best case scenario here. Also looking to just sit there and move him out. While on some of the pitching, obviously Aaron Nola started the season as un-Aaron Nola-like as you could possibly imagine. And with each of his last three starts now, he's made small, not drastic, but small improvements to his game and his starts in each of the last 3 weeks. I think it was most important this one against St. Louis, as the last two came against Detroit and Miami, two pretty terrible offenses. What's been your evaluation and your thought on the last handful of Aaron Nola starts, and are you comfortable and confident in saying he's back, or do you still need to see a little more?
Well, I think I said it in our last episode, or maybe the one before that, going into the two starts they had against Miami and Detroit. At that point, I said that I was hesitant to say that he was going to be back if he did well against those two teams, given that they're not great offenses. They're not, heavy hitting, high scoring offenses. But the fact that he went out to St. Louis and he shut them down, he only allowed 1 run in 6 innings. Granted, he did need 100 pitches to get through it, so he wasn't always as smooth as sometimes he is. But the fact, once again, that that's a high-powered Cardinals offense out there. They can score some runs, and especially on their home turf, to go out there and hold them to 1 run in 6 innings. That tells me I wouldn't say he's 100% back, but he's definitely on the track to being there.
I think the biggest thing for me is the fact that it's starting to look like he is spotting his fastballs where he wants to again. And while his off-speed pitches don't have quite the same sharpness and break, they're getting there. He's about 1 inch to 2 inches off on drop and break in his off-speed pitches right now comparatively to what he was last year. But that is far closer than what he was earlier in the year. There's a sharpness there to his ball that we didn't see early on this year, and we're starting to see it now. His curveball's starting to have that bite. It's starting to have that late drop, and it's a severe drop too. And there's a lot of deception based on the way that he throws. So much of that is starting to begin to work in Aaron Nola's favor. You mentioned it. He's still not quite as sharp. He does still struggle with command to an extent right now, but it's certainly not as bad as it was early on in the season with the 4, 5, and 6 walks at times. So there's a lot to be comfortable with right now with Aaron Nola. I think is probably the way to say it, that he is progressing through gradually, but progression nonetheless. And that's a big thing. Having Jake Arrieta have the type of season that he is having right now. Jake Arrieta's not missing bats, but he's missing the fat part of bats. He's creating soft contact. Yeah, it's very Cliff Lee-ish. He was able to sit there and draw that soft contact. And this year, the defensive placements and setups are just so much more routine and simple than what they were last year. And you can see that. Jake Arrieta is having a really strong year. So to get an Aaron Nola progressively working his way back is huge. Throw in the fact that Jared Eichhoff right now is just filthy. That's a really, really good top 3. Eflin, again, he's a middle-of-the-road guy. I'm never overly excited about him, never overly down on him. He's just a guy to me. But this rotation right now, when you do take a look at what Aaron Nola has proven he can be, what Jake Arrieta has proven that he can be, and is showing right now that he is that again, and then Jared Eichhoff, that's pretty damn good. So with that on the Jared Eichhoff thing, before we move out of pitching here, Jared Eichhoff goes 8 innings today, throws 106 pitches, mixes in fastballs, changeups, curveballs, and he was showing a more effective slider again. Do you have the words to sit here and say how proud and how happy you are for a guy like Jared Eichhoff, who just a few years back, he was an opening day starter. He was our best pitcher, and then injuries plagued this guy, and he's finally back. Do you have enough words, positive things that you could say about a guy like Jared Eichhoff?
It's tough to come up with them. I'm just so happy to see that he's come back from his injuries, really debilitating injuries that kept him out for a long period of time. And these are some injuries that some players, some of them never fully recover from. So the fact that he's able to come back and he's pitching at a high level the way that he is right now, it's just really awesome to see, both as a Phillies fan and as someone who wants the Phillies to win, and also for him personally, just to have that kind of success after such a huge setback. That's huge for him as well as for the team. So it's great to see.
Yeah, you mentioned it. Last year, at various points in his recovery, he was experiencing tingling down into his fingertips. So there was the thought and concern that he was never going to be able to quite feel the laces of the baseball the same way ever again. You think about it. Pitchers pitch differently in extremely warm and like damp type of environments than what they would pitch in October when it's freezing. The baseball feels different now. Imagine that year round, no matter the elements, to not be able to feel the pressure on the laces and You don't know if you're going to spike a curveball or if it's just not going to spin and do anything. And that was what Jared Eichhoff was experiencing, and that kind of radiated throughout his entire arm. So it is scary stuff that he was going through, as minor as they made it appear, and that they were just routine setbacks. They really weren't. So to see him battle back in that type of fashion and to do things, for lack of a better way of saying it, but the right way. He didn't come in and just demand a spot in the rotation. He knew he was going to have to work. He knew that he was going to have to capitalize on, someone else's misfortunes. And unfortunately, it was Nick Pivetta. But he was ready, and he took advantage of that. And he's pitching to the tune of a 1.5 ERA right now through 3 or 4 starts. And he's been arguably the Philadelphia Phillies' best pitcher since he's been up. So you really cannot say enough positive things for Jared Eichhoff.
Yeah, absolutely. It's just been great to watch him pitch. He looks really good out there. He looks so much better than he even did when he first came up, when he was having a solid, rookie season, sophomore season. He looks better than I've ever seen him pitch, and that's a really encouraging thing for the Phillies.
It absolutely is. And again, when you have a guy who, so I've said it for a long time, there's nothing truly sexy about Jared Eichhoff. Like, his curveball is probably it. But you do know that you're consistently going to get 5, 6, 7, 8 innings a night out of him, and he's going to keep you in the game. Whether he's given up 1, 2, 3, 4 runs, you're always going to be in shooting distance of coming away with a W. And that's huge to be able to go out there as an offense, to go out there with that kind of confidence and to not have to fear, holy shit, Vince is on the mound. We may be down 12 by the second. To know you're going to be in this ball game throughout the meat of the game, that just has to be just such a confidence boost for that offense. As good and as deep as our offense is, even the best in baseball need that confidence boost and that assurance to know that they're going to be in this baseball game with a particular pitcher on the mound. And Jared Eichhoff has provided that throughout his entire major league career.
Yeah, he's been great. He really has been great. And he kind of reminds me a little bit of, I guess I'd call him a younger version of Arrieta, in the fact that he doesn't rely on velocity. He's got some off-speed stuff, and he doesn't try to strike guys out. He's willing to pitch to contact and get the outs that way, which I actually really appreciate from a pitcher because it helps keep the pitch count down. It's a much more effective and efficient way to get through a ball game than just trying to strike everybody out.
Yeah, it's very different from what this era and style of baseball is. Everyone's a power arm now. It's all about strikeouts. It's all about missing barrels and missing contact as a whole. You don't see a lot of guys that are willing to sit there and produce consistent soft contact and keep the ball in play, and pound the strike zone in the ways that he does. I think the Arrieta comp is a fair one. I think it's more of this version of Arrieta. He's like that because, Arrieta when he was younger was that 97, 98 power pitcher, and he was blowing by some significant hitters. But now you see that evolution of Jake, knowing his 93 to 95 is no longer 95 to 98. And as much as we sit there and think, man, maybe that's not that big of a difference, it is. And Jared Eichhoff's doing that at 89 to 91. So it speaks volumes to the movement and creativity and just pinpoint accuracy in that location from a guy like Jared Eichhoff, because he needs to rely on pretty much perfection. And again, he works all 4 of his pitches extremely well, or at least 3 of them. His changeup's a little bit iffy. Let's turn things over to the offense here. Before we get to the middle of the order, let's talk a little bit about Cesar Hernandez. So Cesar, obviously, over the last several weeks has been a punching bag for Philadelphia Phillies Twitter. It's been a punching bag for our podcast and many shows that talk Phillies baseball. For a bit, he was letting it affect his offensive abilities. You can't say that now. He's now, after today's game, he is hitting 305. And I think over the last 8 to 10 games or so, he's hitting right around 400. Cesar Hernandez he's got a home run during that stretch. He's got a handful of doubles during that stretch. He's made a couple decent base running. He's had a couple decent base running plays during that stretch. Cesar is getting hot at a time where it's incredibly important for him and for the Philadelphia Phillies to get hot, because Scotty Kingery is starting to run this week. And if you'd have asked us 8 to 10 games ago, we would have been saying, well, how if he can kind of run, can he kind of play? Because Scotty Kingery on one leg is probably better than what Cesar is. Cesar is starting to show that he is that 294 average that we had grown to expect from him in the middle of his Philadelphia Phillies career. What's your evaluation right now on a guy like Cesar Hernandez? And you credit the fact that Scotty's right around the corner from coming back as to where some of this is now starting to take place for Cesar?
Well, I think that's got something to do with it. He's feeling Scotty breathing down his neck right now, so obviously he's turned his game up a little bit. As you said, got the average over 300. He had a home run today, and really, I mean, he had 3 hits today, which is huge because the 2 through 5 guys did not have a single hit. They had a few walks. Harper, Hoskins, and Real Muto all walked once, but none of them had any base hits today. So the fact that he had those 3 hits and the 3 RBIs, that was kind of the catalyst for the offense today. But in the long term, I still see Scotty as being the better second baseman. I think he's got more all-around talent. I think he's a better all-around hitter, a better combination of a little bit of sneaky power and a guy who can hit up in the high 200s at least. Cesar, however, would be a nice guy coming off the bench and for a spot start here and there. So it's really going to be interesting to see how things go once Kingery comes back.
For me, the biggest thing about all of this is timing. You want to maximize the value of a Cesar because no one's beating down the door to acquire a 28-year-old second baseman in an offseason in a market that hasn't really seen a need for second baseman. His value is going to go to a team that is not in full rebuild mode, but in a team that wants to take a chance on, hey, we have a middle infielder that went down. They're going to miss 30 to 60 days. We need someone that's going to come in here and provide stability to our offensive game. Cesar can do that for them. Trying to find a way to maximize the value of someone that is on the move is so difficult. But you can't turn away the offensive production that he's been putting forth right now. It almost puts these other GMs in a position to say, I don't really give a shit. I understand that they have to move him because they have Scotty Kingery in the wings. I'm going to overpay. I'm going to do what I have to do because he's hitting 305. He's got a little bit of power and he can play all over the diamond. And right now my team may need that. And that's what the Phillies have to bank on. They have to bank on a GM willing to sit there and have that kind of a mindset. And the best thing that can happen and the easiest way to make that happen is for Cesar to have the offensive type of numbers and output that he's having right now. And that's coming after starting this year really, really bad offensively. He's been very, very good over the last handful of weeks at a minimum. With that, before we get into, no, we'll skip the Scotty Kingery talk. We'll bring that back when he's actually ready to play. Let's go to Bryce Harper. Bryce Harper right now he's kind of had a target on his back here. More so I think with the national media, because the national media loves to villainize Philadelphia and Philadelphia's fans. The Boo Birds have come out for him, but it wouldn't matter if the name was Bryce Harper. It would not matter if it was Cesar Hernandez. It wouldn't matter if it was Phil Gosselin. If someone was in a poor stretch, Philadelphia fans react the same. The national media takes that to another level. Now, Bryce Harper, there's no question that some of the things that are currently going poorly with him are concerning. He is striking out at an incredibly high clip. He is currently on pace for the 6th most strikeouts in an MLB season. If he again mirrors this pace for the duration of the season, it's weird. He doesn't look super comfortable in the box for a lot of the time, and then all of a sudden he has a game or two where everything off the bat is 103 miles an hour. It just happens to go right at someone, and then he goes 0 for 5 the next night with 3 strikeouts, and then he comes out and he hits a grand slam. Bryce Harper's season has been so hard to evaluate. I have a particular stance on the season, And there's a comparison now that's been thrown out there a lot over the last week. And I'm annoyed about it because I like to think that I found that comparison prior to everyone else finding it, but we're putting this show out late, so I can't give myself that type of credit. But I'm curious to sit there and see what your evaluation of Harper's season is so far, and is it more or less what you've been expecting?
It's definitely less than what I've been expecting, especially after that hot start to start off. The fact that the average has dipped down to 231 right now, the fact that his power, I mean, obviously he had the grand slam the other night, but his power hasn't been what it was early on in the season, despite the fact that the weather has gotten warmer, which is typically better hitting weather. The strikeouts are much higher than what I thought they would be. But at the same time, I look back at Bryce Harper last season. I think at this point last year, he's hitting like 190 something, if I'm correct about that. And then
he had a slow start.
Yeah, he had a. If you think this is bad, this is a bad start for him. He had a terrible start last year, and he got it together. He brought his batting average up a good 50 to 60 points by the end of the season. And I think that we can expect that, maybe not 50 to 60 points, but I think that we could expect him to bring that average up into the somewhere between 260 to 270 range by the time the season is over. I think he's going to get going. I think that once the whole lineup gets going, Bryce is going to be a huge part of that, and he's going to benefit from it. And I think that as the season goes along, especially in the second half, since he is a guy who tends to heat up in the second half of the season, we're going to see that, and everything's going to be all right with Bryce. I was a little bit worried with him. I've seen him, despite the fact that he's still had a few offers over the past few games. When he does make contact, he's hitting the ball hard, like you said, right at people. You can't really blame him for that. That's just part of being in funk. So I think that he's going to snap out of it. He's going to get it going, and he's going to be a huge part of what should be a very fun Phillies offense to watch this season.
I agree that when the rest of this offense takes off, it is going to help maximize Bryce Harper. Right now, I do feel as though the rest of the offense certainly benefits from him in the lineup, regardless of him struggling or not. You know, when you see Bryce Harper's name in the 3 spot, you understand that you have to pitch differently to, hitters 1 through 5. You understand that you have to now get out guys 6 through 8, 6 through 9. Just seeing a name like that, having that kind of a pedigree follow you in that lineup makes a huge difference, whether or not he's on or not. But so the comparison that I had, and again, I didn't know the specific numbers at the time when I was making the connection. I just recalled the start. 2015 to now. I don't know if you've seen these, if it's been all over Twitter, it's been on other radio stations, it's been on other podcasts. Bryce Harper's MVP season, I saw him hit 330 or so, had 40-plus home runs, just shy of the 100 mark on RBIs. Bryce Harper struggled through the first 35 games of the season and struggled pretty bad. They were very similar numbers to what we're seeing right now. The strikeouts were up. The walks, while they were there, they weren't quite as high as they were for the last 4.5 months of the season. His power was minimal. I think he had 4 home runs throughout the first 35 games there. He's got 7 here. His RBI was down at that point. There are a lot of very, very comparable numbers through the first 35 plus games, or 35 games or so, from his MVP season to now. Now, I'm not saying that we can go ahead and we can then expect him to just all of a sudden turn it on and hit 330 this year, have 120 RBIs and hit 40 plus home runs. I don't know that that's fair, but what I would say is that you're looking at a player whose talent is so true that you can't rule that out. At any point, Bryce Harper can really flip that switch and he can turn that on. We've seen that throughout his entire career. He's legitimately had essentially one bad half of baseball in his career, like one miserable half, and that was last year, the first half of the year. He's had some stretches throughout the time where you might see maybe a month or so go by where he has numbers similar to right now. But that being said, when Bryce Harper is struggling to the national media right now, and he is not performing to the expectations that most people would have liked after seeing that contract signed here in Philadelphia, what's Rhys Hoskins doing?
Rhys is absolutely raking right now. He's one of the best hitters in all of baseball.
Do you think that Rhys Hoskins does that if Bryce Harper's not hitting in front of him.
Oh, absolutely not. It's all a matter. It's all because of the guy who's in front of him. I mean, Bryce, even when he's hitting 230, he's still that scary name that pitchers don't want to pitch to, and they'd rather pitch around him and then face Hoskins. Who knows if that changes as the season goes along, because Hoskins is on pace to hit over 50 home runs right now. But yeah, certainly for the time being, Rhys Hoskins having a great season, and a lot of that can be attributed to having Bryce Harper ahead of him in the order.
I think what you just said there is extremely important, because eventually, when this continues, because Rhys is hitting over 300, he might be under 300 now after today's 0 for 4, 0 for 5, whatever he went.
He's at 295 right now.
295 now. Teams may have to start pitching to him with more caution, which may open things up for Bryce in the 3-hole, may open things up more for JT Realmuto, who's hitting 280 plus throughout most of the season right now. This team is so deep, and there's so much talent there, and so much pop and power, and just spray the ball, and such good and patient hitters, that I don't know that any single member of this team, even its worst hitter, I don't think any of them can stay cold for longer than a few weeks at a time. And that's exactly why I think it's incredibly unfair for people to be jumping down Bryce Harper's throat right now, because he is, at the end of its day, the most talented offensive player in this entire locker room clubhouse. To expect that he's not going to break out of this slightly lesser of a production value that what we would like from Bryce Harper is so unfathomable to me. It's people being incredibly short-sighted and failing to look at the picture as a whole. We're a first-place baseball team. We have a third-year first baseman who is absolutely raking, and we have pieces around him who aren't too bad themselves. You got a guy hitting 330. You got a catcher hitting 280. This is a damn deep roster, and that doesn't happen without a guy like Bryce Harper.
Yeah, and that was on full display today. I mean, as I said, the 2 through 5 guys were an offer today. And guess what? They still went out there and scored 5 runs, which is 5 runs in a game is a pretty productive game offensively. And to do that without the meat of the order producing, that says a lot about the depth of their offense.
100%. And as we mentioned, we are a first-place team. Now, you and I have shared text messages back and forth, and we've had text messages in the podcast group as well. And in particular, I've had a lot of conversation with my father lately over Philadelphia Phillies baseball and this first-place team. It feels like we say to each other all the time, whether it be with the Phillies, whether it be with the Flyers, the Sixers, the Eagles, it doesn't really matter. But whomever we're sitting there and we're talking about, if they're in first place, at some point we say, has there ever been a more maddening or frustrating team that's in first place than this Philadelphia Phillies team, or than this Flyers, Sixers, or Eagles team? This team, when they lose, damn, they lose bad. When they win, they have the opportunity. They put some crooked numbers up there. But when they don't look right, they just really, really don't look right. How frustrating has this team been for you so far, despite the fact that they're in first place?
Well, they're pretty much a mirror image of the 76ers, you know. As you said, that when they win, they look great. When they lose, they look terrible. And I think you actually said that word for word about the Sixers in our TJ's One of Us that we just recorded.
Probably.
But yeah, when they lose, it's always either a blowout where they lose, you know, what was it, 6-0 that they lost the other day? Or the game that they lost to, I think it was the Mets earlier on in the season. A couple games they lost to the Mets where they got blown out. A blowout loss to the Marlins as well. And then they've had a number of games, especially against the Nationals, where the bullpens come in with a lead and they've completely blown it. Blown that game with 2 strikes in the second series, against the Nationals. Blown that game with 2 strikes and 2 outs in the 9th inning. That was excruciating. And then the one over the weekend, I think it was Saturday night, another excruciating bullpen loss by the Phillies. So they lose 2 ways. They lose by getting blown out, or they lose by their bullpen just completely pissing away a game. So that is why they're so frustrating to watch. Or so frustrating when they lose, I should say, because when they win, they look great. They're one of the most fun teams in baseball to watch when they win. But yes, the losses, they're always coming in a frustrating fashion.
Yeah, I couldn't say that any better myself. You sit there and you evaluate the ways that they lose baseball games, and it's one of two ways. It's we can turn the TV off by the third inning because they're getting blown out, or we understand that the bullpen is imploding tonight, and we're going to see a handful of those Washington losses that we've seen so far this year. That's it's tough. I don't know that they've lost more than 2 or 3 games this year that were just good baseball games. They lose, they just look terrible, and it's extremely hard to sit there and bounce back as a fan and come back the very next night and be super confident after that, which is absurd because they are 12-5, 12-4 following a loss. So they do bounce back. It's tough. And just like we mentioned on that 76ers segment, you're probably right. When they lose, man, it's debilitating. It is a tough product to watch.
Yeah, it's certainly been the case so far. But as I think as the season goes along, we're going to see just what this team is, and we're going to be happy with what we're getting out of them. I think that they're going to be a first-place team throughout the season. I think that they're going to win the division, and the frustrations, those frustrating losses, we'll have our share of them throughout the season, but I think that they're going to become fewer and far between. So I think it's something that's going to frustrate us now, but it won't be as much of an issue going on later in the season.
I agree, and I do think this is still a feeling out process for a lot of these guys. This is a very, very different team than what it was last year. It's when you look at it, our 3 of our most crucial hitters and integral hitters to a lineup last year are our back end of the lineup now. So it's an adjustment. All the way around, up and down the order, up and down the rotation, in and out of that bullpen. It's an adjustment. So before we sign off on this one, we're going to check in just on some of the team's early season predictions that so far. We're just going to see how each of our predictions so far are kind of working up. So, Rob, one of your early season predictions was that you stated that the Philadelphia Phillies would not experience a shutout all year. How's that going?
It's only happened twice so far, I think, 2 or 3 times. But
I think it's 2.
Yeah, I mean, for a while, I don't think they got shut out for maybe the first 20 games of the season. So it was looking good for a while, and then they got shut out by the Mets, I want to say it was. And then again, just the other night by the Cardinals. But, their offense, it's kind of come and gone, but for the most part, it's looked pretty solid. And, okay, maybe they're going to get shut out a few times, but it's not going to be many.
I think you were bold in your prediction originally, but I do think it's fair to sit there and think that number will be incredibly low by season's end. We may only see a handful throughout the regular season because this offense is just too deep and too talented. One of LJ's predictions was that he believed that Maikel Franco was going to lead the team in home runs. And if it were not for Rhys Hoskins' just killer month of April and extending into May, he would be onto something right now. Maikel Franco has 7 home runs and is tied for second on the team with Bryce Harper, following only that of Rhys Hoskins and his 11, as you mentioned, on pace for over 50 home runs this year. Franco swinging a hell of a bat this year out of the 8-hole. And he's beginning to take the baseball the other way, maximizing the entire field right now. Maikel Franco looks like a completely different baseball player, both in the box and at the hot corner at third base. Just before we touch on some of the other predictions that we had, what's been your evaluation of Franco so far?
Franco's been great, and he's cooled off a little bit since his hot start, but being an 8-hole hitter, if you're getting 250, if you're getting all those home runs and RBIs and extra base hits out of them, that's great. And he's come up with a number of huge hits. He had a big hit in that Nationals game that the Phillies inevitably ended up blowing on a Saturday night. He also had that big go-ahead 3-run double against Detroit last week. So he's one of the guys who I would love to have at the plate in a clutch situation late in the game. Obviously, he had a walk-off home run last season. So he's not fazed by clutch situations. If he comes up with guys on base and they need a few runs late in the game, aside from Harper and Hoskins, he's the guy who I'd want at the plate. And maybe McCutchen. But I love the fact that, like you said, he's going the other way. He's added that to his repertoire. He's still got the power. He's probably going to cool off a little bit in terms of where he's projected to hit home runs wise. I don't think he's going to hit 40. I think maybe he'll hit in the low 30s somewhere. But I'm really happy to see what I've seen from Maikel Franco so far this season.
Yeah, I could not be any more excited for Maikel. And everyone knows this. Everyone who listened to us last year in our first year, I have never been a pro Maikel Franco guy. I've always felt as though he was a complete head case who was never going to put it all together. And it turns out that all he needed was the 8-hole. He needed to sit there and be in a position that forced him to not be an idiot. Because I do think at his core, he is baseball stupid. But this position in this type of a lineup, it forces him to be slightly less baseball stupid. And who'd have thunk it, being slightly less baseball stupid, puts him in there and has 7 home runs, 26 RBI, and is playing a really, really solid defense at third base. I could not be happier for Maikel Franco. It pisses me off to no end that LJ's probably going to win that bet. I think he wins every bet that we make here on ANYP. But he seems to be on to something right now with that. He'll have a hell of a race with Franco or with Harper and Hoskins. But he's going to make it interesting, and I appreciate that from Mike.
Yeah, it seems like L wins just about every bet and everything. That little black book that you guys have with all the bets, it looks like everyone's checked off for an LJ win. So you need to
absurd.
Start changing that.
No, I think I'm gonna let him bet, and then whatever I bet here, I'll go bet at the casino significantly more on whatever it was that LJ bet against me. So somehow we'll come across in the red, or in the black. One of mine was the fact that I said that Jared Eichhoff is going to come up and be an integral part to the rotation. And what do you know? Early on, Jared Eichhoff comes in and fills the role of Nick Pivetta and has been arguably the Philadelphia Phillies' best pitcher. So I'm feeling pretty confident about the Eichhoff take so far. So Jared, since we know you listen to the podcast, thanks, dude. We appreciate what you're doing. What was another one of yours?
Another one of mine was Rhys Hoskins hitting 45 home runs. And as we just said, he's on pace for more than 50. I don't know if he's going to keep up at that pace, but I think 45 is a realistic expectation for him.
Yeah, I think that playing in this ballpark, man, and the way that he hits and with the protection he's got in front and behind him, I see no way that he cools off so badly that he doesn't press that number. So I think that's a pretty safe bet there for you. He is certainly one of the most young and exciting hitters in all of baseball right now. And I can't wait to start throwing the word feared around. It'll be a little bit for him to garner that type of consistent respect, but it's getting there. Hitting 295 early on and that 11 home runs will do it for you. Another one of LJ's, also looking very good through the first month of the season. He said that Jake Arrieta, I believe his number was 18 wins. Do you remember offhand?
It sounds right, 18 wins. Yeah, that sounds about right.
I think he said it was going to be 18 wins for Jake. And right now he is tied for the league. For the lead right now in the Phillies rotation. He has 4 wins on the early season along with Zach Eflin. We've mentioned it earlier in the show. Really impressed by what he's been able to do so far. He's certainly reinvented himself, knowing that he can no longer be that 95 to 98 power pitcher who's going to blow things by you. He's relying a lot on movement. Every single thing that he throws moves. I was watching his last start at Stephanie's grandfather's house with him, and he had mentioned that his ball moves so similarly to what it looked like the late Holiday threw. Everything moved. Every fastball he threw was down and in, and just that severe, harsh, heavy movement. And he lived on that soft contact at times. And right now, Jake Arrieta's doing that. So LJ, once again, maybe on to something else because he can't ever be wrong. Good for L. Let's see. One of the other ones that I had was that I believed that Andrew McCutchen would mirror the first half of the season that Raul Ibanez had in 2009, and that he would carry it beyond the first half and extend throughout the entire first year of his Philadelphia Phillies career. He has been up and down. He's been a little streaky. He's still getting on base at a decent clip. His average is right around 240 or so. He does have 5 home runs so far and has utilized that right center gap on more than one occasion so far for the Phillies. I'm not super confident right now that those numbers are going to hit as strongly as that first half did for Raul in 2009. But if there's a player, an older player in baseball that I trust, it's going to be Andrew McCutchen. He is a true pro out there for the Philadelphia Phillies, and I do think that there's a bit to like about his game right now, more than a bit to like about his game. So we'll have to check back in on that next month, and we'll see how some of our bold predictions are standing going forward, going then. But before we sign off, do you have any final thoughts here on the Philadelphia Phillies?
I just wanted to add on to your McCutchen thing there. One thing that's not taken into consideration there is Raul Ibanez. What was he, a left fielder? I mean, he was, I guess, kind of average, maybe even a little bit below average.
He was statistically one of the worst left fielders in baseball.
Okay, well, there you go. And Andrew McCutchen is a plus center fielder. He's done a great job defensively, and you could factor that in when you're comparing his first half to Raul Ibanez's. It doesn't have, if you don't want to be strictly, at the plate defensively, he's been great so far.
I'll have to look at the overall WAR numbers for each of those players. Andrew McCutchen, obviously, filling in admirably in center field. He certainly lost a step. Now with Odubel back, he's obviously slid back to left field, a position that he's played very well so far in Philadelphia. He's just a very, very smart professional baseball player. And at age 32, he certainly knows his limitations, and you can sense that. There's a little bit less of a risk in some of his plays, and a little bit more safety and security. But still, nonetheless, he is a far, far superior defensive player than what Raul Ibanez ever was. But from a strictly offensive standpoint, Raul Ibanez, his first half in 2009, currently still beating the first half of Andrew McCutchen here in his first year in Philadelphia. But we got a little bit of ways to go, so we'll see how that goes. But final thoughts here for ANYP on the In Kap We Trust segment. Rob, anything further that you have?
One more thing. I predicted 95 wins for the Phils, and by my math, if it is correct, they're at a 583 winning percentage right now. 583 winning percentage through 162 games takes them to 94.4 wins. So I'm just about right on pace with that.
I think their 95 wins is a fair assessment, and I do think that they have found more success than I anticipated them finding in the early going in the division, and that's with, again, some terrible, terrible losses built in there. And the Mets and the Nationals, neither team look very good right now. And that was something we certainly did not see going into this season. I certainly felt as though both of those teams, I felt like all four teams atop this division, it was going to be a 4-team race to the end, and certainly doesn't look that way right now. So you're 95. You may be on something right there. You may be winning that one. I think me and LJ each had, I think L was 89 or 90. I think I was 91, 92, something like that. But regardless, it's good to have exciting and meaningful baseball even in the first month of the season here in Philadelphia. Philadelphia has been starved for this kind of baseball energy, and it's great to see it back in Citizens Bank Park.
8 years now, man. Finally. It's finally happened. Finally back.
Finally back. And damn it, if the Flyers can't fix and turn some things around, we may be looking at four just supremely talented and perennial potential championship rosters in the city. And it's an extremely, extremely exciting time to be a Philadelphia sports fan. But that is going to conclude things here for In Kap We Trust for the Always Next Year podcast. You can find us on Twitter at ANYP, or ANYPodcast, excuse me. You can find us on our website, www.alwaysnextyearpodcast.com. You can find Rob on Twitter. Rob, where can we find you, sir?
At radio_Rob.
And you can find me, the host of this segment, at Shane_Mead. You can also find LJ and tell him how right he is about all of his takes, and anything that he chooses to bet, I would strongly encourage you to bet the same.
Or you could just bombard him with Sixer stuff on there.
You could also do that. His is at LJ Harrell 54. It took me a minute to remember that. But that'll be it for In Kap We Trust here at the Always Next Year podcast. We're going to turn this over to the Jackdaws and sign us off one last time.
A fighting man I used to be, revered and feared through Killarney. Now I'm back, hitching with a win. But if Mickey Flynn should ever fight me, I'll throw me caution all behind me and square up fall on that son of a bitch again. He cracked open a rib or two, he beat me Sunday through and through, and such over my unconscious frame. I won me healthy sheriff fights, well lucky son still had me life since Mickey Flynn beat me dumb and lame.
This has been a production of the Always Next Year Podcast Network. You can subscribe to our podcast on Apple Podcasts, Stitcher Radio, Spotify, Spreaker, and SoundCloud. Please also remember to rate and review this podcast to validate our members' life choices. We appreciate it. This is ANYP, signing off.